This video is sponsored by MANTA Sleep. Recently, I've been thinking about what exactly makes up the identity of the Silent Hill series. There are the visuals, the gameplay, the music and sound design, as well as the story and lore, which have all been expanded upon or reimagined across the entire series. Throughout the many installments, different development teams over multiple console generations have created their interpretation of what makes Silent Hill. And while I enjoy exploring those official interpretations, I decided to delve into the slightly wilder world of mods. That concept of taking a game that has nothing to do with Silent Hill and morphing it into an experience that one can associate with the series is a process I knew I could learn from. I wanted to see exactly what kind of changes these games went through to become Silent Hill. For that reason, I focused on mods that weren't just remaking the entire campaign of an existing entry in the franchise as accurately as they can, and instead offering their own story. I guess you could say that, in a way, I was looking for unique experiences that could still perfectly nail that atmosphere while approaching Silent Hill from a completely different angle. This obviously isn't an exhaustive list, but it is one that I had such a blast playing through. I get a lot of comments telling me how many of you like to listen to my videos as you fall asleep, and I for one am honoured to contribute to a good night's rest. You might even be nodding off to this video right now, which I mean, we're only like, a minute in? But anyway, there's something else that could help you sleep even easier, which brings me on to today's sponsor, MANTA Sleep. MANTA Sleep offers a premium range of sleep masks from a silk version to the MANTA Sound Mask, which has ultra-thin Bluetooth speakers for a more comfortable listening experience with a 24-hour battery life and no battery level notification sounds to interrupt your sleep. The eye cups and adjustable fit of the masks allow even side sleepers to rest comfortably in addition to the 100% blackout feature with zero eye pressure. In the case of the sound mask, you can effortlessly alter the position of the speakers exactly where you need them, and they can be easily removed and put back in for when you want to machine wash the mask. With the MANTA Sound Mask, you can listen to my videos or a podcast or anything you want while you fall asleep or take a nap. And don't worry, I won't be upset that you don't just have my channel endlessly repeating on a playlist. But I won't complain if you do. From now until the 15th, you can get 15% off site-wide, so use the link in the description and join the pro-nap movement today. A big thank you to MANTA Sleep for sponsoring and supporting the channel. Now back to the mods. I started off with Silent Hill ALCHEMILLA, a mod for Half-Life 2 which was created by White Noise team and released in 2015. I have a whole video on how much I adore the style of Half-Life 2, and basically anything on the Source engine, so the visuals in ALCHEMILLA instantly caught my attention. Even though this mod came out a decade ago, I was blown away by how incredible the atmosphere and environments were, quite literally stopping me in my tracks just so I could look around and admire the scenery. I feel like Half-Life 2 is one of the easier ones in this list to adapt to look like a PS2 Silent Hill title, and considering the actual textures and possibly even 3D models from those games were used in ALCHEMILLA, this is the most faithful reconstruction of the atmosphere of Silent Hill that I've included in this video. I'd honestly recommend playing ALCHEMILLA just for that alone, but those who are hoping for combat or a survival horror aspect on top of that might be a little disappointed. It is very heavy on puzzles, which I didn't mind at all, and some of them were actually quite satisfying to solve. However, probably due to my severe lack of sleep and attention being split while streaming, other puzzles felt very obtuse, and I needed to consult a guide more times than I'd have liked. I even found a few to be a bit unfair, and a large part of them involved finding certain pieces around the environments, which at times became a very painful endeavour due to the lack of an in-game map. I don't have the best memory, and going through levels with floors of multiple doors that look almost identical to one another while also mentally keeping track of which ones were locked and which ones I needed to come back to was quite hard for me. The lack of map definitely increased my reliance on using a guide for some levels, and in the final stretch of the game, the way that rooms and floors connect with one another is purposefully trippy, which is very cool, but only once you understand how it works, and that isn't the easiest thing to figure out in the first place. That being said, I do like puzzles that have me writing down notes on a piece of paper, and ALCHEMILLA definitely offers that experience. It is possible to die in the game, usually resulting in gibbing to remind you this is a Half-Life 2 mod. But these deaths didn't really have any consequence, and I was simply put back to an autosave which was always relatively recent. In terms of interactions with the environments, the only other thing I want to mention is that there was a weird hitbox for a valve which stopped me from progressing for a while, and there wasn't a visual indicator to let me know I was standing at the right distance, so I initially thought I couldn't interact with them at all. There are rare instances where physics come into play, and I'm just going to blame it on my lack of sleep for the length of time it took me to realise I could pick up one of the cabinet doors under the sink. The story introduces new characters into the pre-existing lore of Silent Hill, almost acting as a spin-off that would make sense in its foggy universe. Dr. Kaufman notably has a large role in the narrative, and having those connections in place was a really nice touch. The storyline in ALCHEMILLA was enjoyable, even if it did end on a slightly unsatisfying note, though it was one that you could argue works thematically. Another thing I want to mention is that there are a handful of funny Easter eggs and references that caught me off guard a few times, but I do appreciate when a mod can get a little silly, especially when fitting them into environments from Silent Hill games to add some breaks to that familiarity. I have to say, one of the best parts of ALCHEMILLA was the soundtrack composed by Ronnie Schultz. The songs were unbelievably well done and sounded like they could exist in an official Silent Hill title, again solidifying this mod as a fantastic way to immerse yourself into the town once more. ALCHEMILLA is clearly a very ambitious project, and I can't help but admire the team's dedication in developing this mod, which took me almost a full 6 hours to complete in its entirety. The second mod is a special case on this list as it lives within Doom 2, a game whose original version predated Silent Hill by 5 years. In that sense, I figured it would be the most difficult to adapt to this completely different atmosphere, especially visually, but it ended up completely blowing away my expectations. The perfectly named Soundless Mound was made for a mapping contest in 2018 and created by Marissa the Magician in less than a month. Because of that, it's more of a short demo rather than a full campaign, and entirely takes place within a mysteriously empty apartment building. Due to the way the map is designed with its Doom DNA in mind, hallways are eerily long, and the entire place feels incredibly liminal, particularly once you rid the virtual space of its monsters. As for the weapons, you'll be able to find a knife and a handgun to fight off the enemies lurking in the apartment building's corridors, as well as healing items and a trusty flashlight. I learned the hard way that resource management is wise to consider, even just a little bit, because the final boss was a whole lot easier when I had a lot of ammo. I've never played anything from the Doom series before, but that didn't affect my experience negatively at all. The combat and mechanics are quite simple, so no prior knowledge is really required. While there are around 50 rooms in total, there's a map you can use which makes navigation much smoother even in the Otherworld sections where spaces don't always behave normally. The transition into the hellish Otherworld is represented fantastically through its architecture, like travelling through an uncomfortably long tunnel to signify transitional boundary between two worlds. I love the moment where I went through a door to then hear a falling sound, and looking upwards I realised that the door I exited out of is somehow on the ceiling. The apartments became more and more surreal and corrupted by the dark realm that has claimed them, and I have to say the Otherworld sections are really well done. Sometimes there are metal vents and gratings separating you from the void beyond, with strange pillars or mirrored rooms behind them, like being stuck in an environment that was duplicated, ripped apart, and then mashed back together again chaotically. It was impossible to miss how effective the lighting and geometric architecture was, adding another layer of surrealism via its simplicity, so in that way the restraints of the game benefited the experience. There were lots of red squares utilised in the environments and also as save points, which reminded me just how synonymous a basic glowing shape is with Silent Hill imagery. Soundless Mound features sound effects from Silent Hill games and even has a little reference here and there alongside the iconic footstep loading screen. This mod is definitely more focused on exploring the vibe and mood of a Silent Hill game rather than trying to tell a Silent Hill-esque story, as that is mostly limited to a few notes here and there left behind by residents that act more as signposts for important objects or keys. The only thing about this mod that took me out of it a little bit was the enemy design, since that stayed pretty much the same as the default Doom 2 opponents, but considering this mod was made in less than a month, its content is outstanding, and I can forgive the odd demon. My roughly hour-long playthrough of Soundless Mound was such a good time, and piqued my interest in Doom mods, so I'll take any recommendations for more to check out. Next up, I checked out Silent Hill CONDO on GARRY'S mod, which was released in 2020 by Sassy Ross. It's a short campaign involving exploring a derelict apartment building, and the narrative reason for that is slowly unravelled along with the protagonist's identity and the events that led to the building's abandonment. The setting reminded me a lot of The Short Message, which came out in 2024, and it was interesting to see such a connection with the official Konami title despite it not having existed at the time of its creation. Impressively, Silent Hill CONDO has multiple endings, which, aside from maybe the staple joke ending, help uncover the full story in addition to environmental details and notes. It was impossible for me to not appreciate the realistic presentation of those collectibles too, as it fed me bite-sized amounts of information with every contextualized document like complaint forms and payment slips. The texture of damaged and stained paper, along with the smudges of pen ink, gave them such a charming authenticity that I really don't see often. And I genuinely feel like it was a lot more fun piecing together the narrative thanks to the immersive and varying formats of written notes. It only takes about an hour or so to experience all 3 endings of the mod, and despite the short playtime, it left a very strong impression. As far as gameplay goes, it's mainly a walking sim with the exception of a chase sequence, which I thought was a nice addition. It even included shifting corridors that reminded me of ones from Silent Hill 3 and Downpour especially, with features that helped convey this repeating labyrinthine feel of the disintegrating otherworld that traps others within it. You'll have to keep an eye out and find the location for keys, notes, and also certain items for the UFO ending. But apart from that, there aren't really any puzzles per se in terms of gameplay. For the type of experience this is though, it's not a hindrance at all, and the storytelling is seriously where this mod shines and succeeds. Like the other mods, it includes some sound effects from Silent Hill 2 and 3, but the music tracks are composed by the mod developer themselves. Of course, they're heavily inspired by Akira Yamaoka and sound fantastic. So I was practically listening to the OST on repeat alongside ALCHEMILLA's while making this video. Visually, I'd say Condo overall doesn't have as strong of a Silent Hill visual flavour for the most part until its otherworld sections, which sport that recognisable reddish rust layer with metal bars and fences imprisoning twitching creatures and bodies blurred behind warping textures. It also features impossible physical arrangements and alterations in the virtual space, like rooms changing or doors appearing after reading notes, or hallways rotated upside down in an illogical manner, all fitting the atmosphere perfectly. There's a recreation of certain areas from Silent Hill 2 which was neat to explore in this first-person Source Engine perspective, but aside from that, it does feel very unique still. If you've got GARRY'S mod and the mod's other dependencies, it's well worth trying for yourselves. Last but certainly not least, I played a Fallout 4 mod named Whispering Hills, which is made by Team Whisper. Unlike the other mods I've spoken about, this one is still having episodes released periodically. The first episode came out in 2019, but since then has seen an additional 3 episodes released, and has even more content planned to be coming out fairly soon. It enshrouds the landscape within a thick fog, adding new enemies from Silent Hill and other horror franchises. Most notably though, it adds a new world space for Whispering Hills, where you can find streets and buildings modelled after those you can find in the Silent Hill series such as ALCHEMILLA Hospital and Midwich Elementary School. It didn't even look like Fallout 4 anymore aside from the UI, which I did learn isn't the easiest thing to make an overhaul for, but even just a simple colour change stopped it from being so distracting. The otherworld sections were especially cool, and combined the typical nightmarish features with the questline for Whispering Hills, which revolves around searching for your missing child. The way this mod approaches the narrative is really unique, as it meshes together the general premise of Fallout 4 with that of Silent Hill and The Order to create a new story. Because of this, you can also run into familiar characters and places from across the entire series, with a whole PT level that was super unsettling at points. One really impressive moment was coming across this virtual world's version of Lisa, who is actually voiced by the original voice actress for her in the first Silent Hill game. There were just so many pleasant surprises across the episodes I played that highlight the mod team's dedication to making an experience that can be enjoyed by both Silent Hill and Fallout fans, and it doesn't force itself to abide by the law of its influences, which allows it to have more creative freedom. Because of that and the variation in levels, the pacing throughout had such a good flow for me, and it never felt like any particular section overstayed its welcome. It's definitely the most combat-heavy mod I've explored for this video, and for the record, I've never played a Fallout game from start to finish. As a result, there was a small learning curve for me throughout the mod, given my lack of knowledge and embarrassingly bad aim, but thankfully I had Twitch chat to support me when I had any questions. However, if you're used to playing Fallout titles, you'll undoubtedly have a much smoother time with combat from the get-go. I didn't really have any fascination in the base game beforehand, but learning how Fallout 4 works alongside the mod made me way more interested in playing it at some point. Because of the restraints the game imposes on the possibilities for mods, there aren't really any hardcore puzzles aside from figuring out where to go next from notes dotted around the levels. But even so, I couldn't believe how imaginative certain sequences are. And while I'm not an expert on Fallout 4 mods by any means, I would absolutely believe you if you told me it pushed the possibilities of modding for this title to the maximum. Silent Hill environments worked amazingly well in presentation and design, using models and textures from spaces in the series as well as sound effects too. There's some original music in Whispering Hills which added a lot to the atmosphere, and I would have never guessed that I'd find so many parts in this mod to be genuinely unnerving. In contrast to that, there are also light-hearted aspects you can engage with, like Easter eggs and costumes, in case you wanted to run around as Robbie the Rabbit and beat things up with a pipe. The hours flew by shockingly quickly while playing Whispering Hills, despite it being the longest one on this list, with my playthrough clocking in at around 11 hours. And as far as the mods on this list go, it's made for a game I initially liked the least out of the 4 options, but in spite of that, it charmed me the most. This journey through these 4 mods each had such a distinctive take on Silent Hill, offering very different experiences that highlighted the clear passion of their creators. Some leaned heavily on puzzles and/or narrative, whereas others focused on combat and surreal sequences within their level design. One even had multiple endings, and it was enlightening to see exactly what feature each mod would take from its influences. But then certain things remained very similar across the board, especially when it came to the visual motifs of otherworld sections, sound effects, and use of textures from early Silent Hill titles, which were mainly in the mods that recreate pre-existing locations. I debated which of the 4 mods was my favourite among them all, but they had individual strengths of their own that almost makes it impossible to compare them. ALCHEMILLA recreated the overall atmosphere and visuals of Silent Hill the best. SOUNDLESS MOUND had the most captivating presentation of the otherworld. Silent Hill CONDO had the best story, including its multiple endings, and Whispering Hills was the most fun to play and is extremely ambitious with its numerous episodes. I'd recommend giving them all a try for yourselves, and if you'd like to see my full playthrough for each of them, I'll have those up on my VOD channel too. Whether created by a solo developer or small group, the distinction between the mods just goes to show how Silent Hill's identity can mean something differently for each person. Yet, it can also showcase the underlying core pieces of the experience, like having them take place within residential buildings and hospitals. Some choices are of course decided by the constraints of the original games that the mods are built from, but none of them stopped these experiences from offering something worthwhile. Thank you for watching, and a big thank you to my patrons for making this all possible. If you'd like to see my future work, please consider subscribing, and if you'd like to catch me live, you can do so over on Twitch. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.